First off, we'll make some introductions. Start with kind of the event committee behind this roundtable, which was the membership team. So I'm Eve Horstman, and I am one of the directors of membership. I also work at GBD Architects.
And my name is McKenna Barnum. I'm a designer at Hyphen, and I'm also a director of membership for our IIDA board. We are led by Laura Saracen, who is the VP of membership. So she's on the call today. And then, of course, by Kate, who is our IIDA president, and Amber Turner, who's our president-elect. So just to give you guys a quick overview on what to expect tonight, we're going to have the formal presentation given by Teresa to start, and then we'll follow it up with a Q&A session with some of our panelists who have recently passed the exams. If you guys have questions, please feel free to use the chat box, or you can also unmute yourself. But if you're not speaking, please make sure to keep yourself muted to reduce any background noise.
Now we'll kind of go through all of the lovely people that we'll be hearing from tonight. So first up, we have Teresa Maurer. Teresa, if you want to wave, or I guess people can find you in the grid of pictures. Teresa is our NCIDQ Ambassador for Oregon, and she's also a Director of Student Affairs on the IIDA board. And then we have three awesome people who are in the process of taking the exams or have already passed. And our first panelist is Ella Benoud. She is a space planning and design manager for Banfield Pet Hospital, and she's also on the board. She's a director of advocacy. Second panelist is, I guess, third panelist is Taylor Pasick, and she's one of my coworkers at GBD Architects. And last but not least is Chloe Kirchhofer. Please, Chloe, if I mispronounced your last name, correct me. And she is with Mackenzie. So you'll be hearing from Taylor and Chloe and Ella later after Teresa presents, hearing about their experience taking the exams, studying, and then also tips and tricks. So start thinking of questions that you have for them to pick their brain.
All right, and with that, Teresa, do you want to get started?
Sure. So I have sharing my screen. Welcome everybody to the NCIDQ Roundtable. Like I mentioned before, I'm going to go through. So this presentation is put together by CIDQ, and so a lot of the information that you'll see on the slide is also information that's up on their website. So I have to mention this because I am also affiliated with the CIDQ on this, that the roundtable is provided by IIDA Oregon as a platform for peers to share their experiences and to kind of talk over the exam, but it's not approved or sanctioned by NCIDQ. So I just have to put that little disclaimer out there, and please refer to the CIDQ website for any information, or you can also contact them directly. At one of the later slides, there'll be some contact information that you guys are welcome to take down if you need to. With that, I will get started on the presentation.
Real quick,
we're going to go over.
Teresa, sorry,
yeah.
We forgot to mention that we're recording this meeting, so just so everyone's aware, we're going to post it on our IIDA Oregon YouTube channel in a couple weeks. But if you prefer to not be in the video, then just use the chat instead. Thanks.
Great. So we'll start with the overview of the NCIDQ exam. So why is NCIDQ certification important? It's considered the industry standard. So there's a lot of different legislation and certifications and differences per state and part of the world. And so the NCIDQ is really the one that's the most recognized throughout everywhere. Many firms require certification for promotional opportunities and senior positions in a firm. It's recognized by all regulated jurisdictions, like I mentioned before. You have an increased salary potential. So in a lot of cases, having the certification makes a difference. And the median salary is about higher, then those cannot hold it. That obviously varies depending on where you live and other factors, but there is a certain potential for making more money if you have to hold the certification. What you need to know. So there's some important news. This is pretty standard from year to year, the information that we give, but this year there's some changes that have happened. So if you've seen past presentations, there will be a few things that you'll note that are slightly different. So we have recent news for 2021. We'll go over that. The exam basics, so basics and exam blueprints, which are new this year. The application process, date, deadlines, and fees, setting for the exams, and then just the certification itself. So recent news as of 2021. So as of January 2021, exams are scheduled to be administered in person at the parametric test centers from April 1st to April 30th. They do not at this time plan to extend the spring exam administration like they did for the fall of 2020. So just be cognizant of that it's still, we're back to April 1st to April 30th for this coming exam period. The new exam blueprint will be in effect for spring 2021 administration. So like I mentioned, if you've seen the past blueprints, you want to make sure that you get the most current ones off the CIDQ website because they have changed. And these blueprints, reflect the results of the 2019 practice analysis. They put out a survey to the profession in 2019, and they reworked a lot of the questions that are in the test based on the information that they received from this practice analysis. And so there's also the candidates taking the practice exam, will utilize and apply new codes. So that's something to also take note of. The NCIDQ exam consists of 3 separate sections. So the first one is the fundamentals, the IDFX. And this is one that's really formulated for someone that's still in school or recently has graduated. So it's about the fundamentals of interior design. And you're not expected to have any working knowledge of working in a firm to take this exam. It's a lot about stuff you learn in the book learning and what you get from your interior design, interior architecture degree. It's multiple choice, 125 questions. 25 of those questions are ungraded pre-test questions, so just be aware about that. 3 hours long. The professional IDPX is a test, and it's aimed at people who have a couple years of experience. So you graduated, you now have a couple years under your belt. So it's really about the profession and working in an office and what that's like. It's multiple choice. 175 questions, 25 of which those are also the ungraded pre-test questions, and it's 4 hours long. And then we have the practicum. So that one is where they give you an actual design problem, a couple design problems, and you use a program where you use hotspot, drag in place, and fill in the blank. And this is really to test, how you would go through floor plans, reflected ceiling plans, door schedules, kind of the meat of what we do as a profession. The drag's not specific software that you have to use, but I do recommend doing some practice runs with this system that they use for that. For 2020, the exams administered on the passing rates, you'll see the graph on the screen. Please note that these reflect the exams that were only taken in the fall. So if you tried to take it last year in the spring, you'll be aware that it was canceled. And so this is really just great for the fall time, which was a couple month period. So you can see the different percentages of the exams that were administered and the passing rate for that. The overall test is worth 800 credits, and you have to have 500 to pass as a passing grade. So we'll get a little bit into the meat of it now. We've got some new exam blueprints. So based on the 2019 practice analysis, they have been revised, and this study happens every 5 years. And so they go through and they relook, are the questions that we're asking, are those the ones that are relevant per type of test? And it identifies the current knowledge and skills that make a minimally proficient professional, and with a focus on the health, safety, welfare of the public. And to note on this one, if you plan to take it in the springtime, there will be no preliminary scoring. So you'll see what that looks like in a future slide, but just note springtime, you have to wait the full 6 to 8 weeks to know if you passed or not, unfortunately, because there's nothing, they need to review the results because there's nothing, no information prior that they could base those off of. So that's something that will affect springtime only. So that's kind of a bummer, but it is what it is right now. And then if you wanted to review the practice analysis, there's a link down on the bottom you can find on CIDQ's website to see how they put the exam together. So that's kind of information if you want to understand a little bit about what's going into these questions, that might be useful to go look at. So the IDFX Fundamentals exam is a little blurry. Hopefully it's not blurry on your screen. So over on the right, it's a little chart and it shows you about the percentages. So these are things, that you learn in school. So programming, site analysis, relationships with human behavior and design environment, design communication techniques like safety, universal design, technical specifications, furniture, fixtures, equipment, professional development and ethics, a little bit of construction documents. And so what you see here, if you're looking at for things things you might not know of or have had a lot of experience in, what I suggest is look at the percentages of how much questions are going to be on the test for that certain percentage. And if there's some area that you feel you're lacking, maybe you want to spend a little bit more time researching and getting an understanding of those areas. The IDPX, the professional exam. Like I said, this is the one where, you're expected to have a couple years under your experience, you've worked in an office, you've gotten a little bit more of an understanding about interior design. So they focus a little bit more technical than the previous exam. This one, again, is multiple choice. You have 4 hours, and it talks about things like project assessment, sustainability, the project process, how you go through design, what the roles are, what are the coordination with maybe MEP, structural, any of those other coordinations that you might not have learned about in school. Business practices, code requirements, laws, standards, regulations, integration with building systems and construction, integration of furniture, fixtures, equipment, and contract administration. So this one's heavily on code requirements, laws, and standards. You can see 20% on that. And then also the integration building systems, contract administration, and also project process is a big part of it. The practice exam. This one you have to have also the 2 years of experience. It's multiple type questions. The hot spots, drag and place, and fill in the blank. You have 4 hours to complete the exam, 120 questions. They focus a lot on code requirements, laws, standard regulations, integration with building systems and construction again, and then also contract documents. This one you have a specific, no specific software that you have to learn, but it is a specific program that you have to navigate. There's 120 questions. One thing to note here is that there's 3 separate case studies, and there's a large commercial, small commercial, and residential. So if you have experience in some but not all of those categories, they're all weighted equally. And so you want to kind of map out your time and make sure that you're giving them equal amounts of time, or try to do the harder ones first, the ones you might not be aware of, and spend a little bit more time on that one because they are weighted equally. And so you want to make sure that you get through all of them. Hopefully that makes sense. So the practicum exam, this is a new thing, new codes. So they're available for download at CIDQ on the organization study. They are, before they kind of left it loosey-goosey about what exam codes they were going to test you on. So they've tried to narrow those down and given you a list of ones that you should really study. And so some of those are the International Building Code 2018 version, the International Plumbing Code 2018, and then the ITC A117.1, so accessible and useful buildings and facilities. And on their website, there's even there's a more in-depth list of the codes that you should really look at. And they want you to look at these codes and not kind of research your own codes or what you think will be applicable for the test. We're going to go into eligibility path. So there's a couple different ways, as you can see here, on how you can go about getting your certification based on your education and your experience. So there's a minimum number of credit hours that you have to have, and then a minimum number of work hours here. And there's also a non-traditional path. So if you, say, got your degree in someplace outside of the United States, there's some different paths that you have to follow. So if that's the case, then I recommend talking directly to CIDQ about what that path might mean for you. I don't want to go into too much detail on here. It's pretty clear about whether you have like a bachelor's degree or master's degree in interior design, or if you have an architecture degree, and then the number of experience that you have. One thing to note, you can start getting hours if you're a practicum student or if you have an internship before you graduate. So if you are still in school, make sure and count those hours. And to get those hours of experience, you either need to have a direct supervisor or a sponsor. And so a little bit, there's a differentiation between those two. So both of them have to be an NCIDQ certified interior designer, a state or licensed interior designer in US and Canada, if that's applicable for your state, or a state and licensed architect in US or Canada. And so a direct supervisor is a design professional in the firm that you work at who gives substantial oversight to your work. You work directly under, they're your project manager, they're the principal in charge, someone who is directly monitoring your tasks. A sponsor could be another design professional that doesn't work in your firm, but is someone who can validate your progress and the hours that you work. A little bit about the application process. So the IDFX, you can take that one by itself. You do not have to take them together. And like I said, you can take that one while you're still in school, in your last year, I believe, of school for that. So what you would do, you would mail in the transcript, pay your fees, and submit to take that test. And then after you mail in your, if you wanted to take the IDPX and the IDFX, you do a similar thing as that one. And then if you wanted to take all three sections at once, it's pretty much the same process, you just do it all combined. The dates and the deadlines, so this is pretty much the yearly, every year it's the same spring and fall exam schedule. It's August 1st to January 31st is when the applications are accepted. So the deadline for spring exams is coming up in about 10 days. So it's January 31st. And then for fall exams, it's July 31st. So those calendar dates are pretty much set from year to year. And then you have from January 31st for spring to March 31st to actually pay and schedule your exam. And then the exam administration is the month of April, so April 1st through the 30th. And the same goes for the fall exams, they're laid out there. So we've got fees. There's a couple different types of fees. You have your application fee and an exam fee. So this chart kind of lays out how much it is per exam and for the application fee, and then also for the exam fees. A little bit about the fees. So your application fee is the fee paid to submit an application for review. So that's just to apply to take the exam. And then the exam fee is the fee paid to purchase the exam for that upcoming administration. So paying that fee allows you to schedule an appointment at the parametric test centers for that exam administration. And the exam fees that you pay, they're only valid for that current exam administration and don't carry forward. So you want to be real careful when you go and you apply to, or you want to do your exam, to make sure that you're going to get it done in that exam administration window. So when you apply to with your application fee, there's a couple of things you want to note. So you have 4 exam administrations, which is about 2 years to actually apply to take the exam for the IDFX. And you have 10 exam administrations, which is about 5 years in order to take the IDPX and the practicum. So that's something also to be aware of, that once you first turn in your application fee, you want to make sure that you have 4 exams and 10 exam administration periods in order to take the exam. Otherwise, you have to start over, and nobody wants that. So about scheduling exams administered April, October, as we talked about. Cancellation fees, if you have to cancel, it's $150 per exam. Rescheduling an exam may be done for the current administration only. Fees to apply. So if you say, I want to do this date at the exam center, and then you have to change it for some reason, there is a fee that applies. And then unscheduled and uncanceled exams, you forfeit your fee. There was, for this last round, when we didn't know what was going to happen and exams got canceled, they did reschedule. And so if there's things like what happened in 2020, there are avenues to get rescheduled, and it's not a cost to you. But on a typical year, it is. So hopefully it's not this year. Studying for the exam. The NCIDQ doesn't have any formal study groups, but they say reach out to your schoolmates, people you knew from college, people who you work with, people in the design community. IIDA is a good resource for forming study groups together. And they also have, on the website here, there's exam reference lists. So please, 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 if you haven't, go to the CIDQ website. There's so much information on there for you to review, and that is helpful tips and tricks. Studying for the exams. This is also based on the website. There's exam blueprints for you to look at. There's, and they're all listed here, the exam building codes and the practicum codes. So go research what they have on here. This will help you immensely. There's also, this is not sanctioned by NCIDQ, but we put it in anyway because we think this is helpful for you. So some of the reference manuals, interior lighting, the ADA standards for accessible design. There's a lot of other books that are very, very helpful. And I know a lot of people that you work with who've taken the test can also point you in the right direction for study material. As I mentioned before, if you take the springtime exams, you will not receive this document, but on a typical exam period, you will receive this shortly after you take the exam. And so this tells you what exam you took and roughly your pass score. And it'll give you percentages about how well you did on each category. So this is very helpful in a typical year, but not during the springtime. And then jurisdictional regulations. So just be sure to check with, Oregon is one thing, but if you happen to be moved to a different state when you go to pass this, what the different regulations are during that to that state. We've got a little bit. I'm going to try to hurry up because I know the best part is talking to people who have recently passed it. Tuition reimbursement. So you can do IIDA, the headquarters offers a reimbursement for people, as well as IIDA Oregon. The foundation awards up to 7 IIDA members per exam period with a reimbursement, and it's a lottery system. So you can look up on the website if this is something that you're interested in. A lot of times employers will pay if you pass, so that's something to check in with too, is that they might reimburse you for passing the exam. And then, like I said, the Oregon IIDA has a chapter education fund also that you can apply to get reimbursed. A couple of professional organizations. So we've got the IDC, we've got the IIDA, and the ASID as organizations that interior designers are typically a part of. And then just once again, certification, why does it matter? It's something that's professionalism, it's prestige, opportunity, eligibility, and leadership in the interior design community. And the last slide is contact information. So I mentioned before, if you have any questions, these are people that you can contact to get more information from CIDQ, and their information is all noted up on the website. And then, all right, turn this over to the panel.
We did have one question in the chat, Teresa, about, this is from Skylar. If our university is not certified as an interior design school, but is still an interior design degree, can we take the IDFX exam while still in school, or would that fall into the 2 years of experience like the other 2 sections of exam?
That's a great question. I believe that you can still take it. I don't think that there's a different number of work hours that you have to have to take the other exams, but I believe that you're still able to take it because it's for a 4 or 5 year program. So I think you just have to be the last year of the school that you're at in order to take the IDFX.
Great.
Are there any other questions? If not, I'll turn it over to the panel.
Thanks, Teresa.
Yeah.
So to kick off the panelist portion, be nice just to have the 3 remaining panelists kind of reintroduce themselves and kind of mention when they took the exam so we can start get an idea of it was pre-COVID or post-COVID and what the situation was. So you guys can take turns. No, Ella, you were kind of next in my lineup of introductions. So if you want to start us off, and then Taylor and Chloe can chime in.
All right. So I started my NCIDQ journey a long time ago. It was a 3-year process for me. In that 3 years, I had 2 kids and managed to somehow, the way the stars aligned, I sat for the fundamentals exam and the professional exam in April. So I did springtime pre-COVID for both of those exams while pregnant, both times. And then I was scheduled to take the practicum this April, and it was rescheduled. And so I ended up taking it in October. We were impacted because there was a longer duration, a longer availability window in the fall. So instead of being able to just take the exam in April, they kept it, October. They kept it open in October and November. And so normally the exam results are issued for the practicum within that 6 to 8 weeks. You don't get them immediately with that handy little kind of scoring checklist that Teresa shared. You'll get that for the 2 previous exams, but not for the practicum until the 6 to 8 weeks. And because they extended the exam window, I didn't find out until December. So it was a very long waiting period. But because it was COVID, I did have to sit with a mask on. And so I would recommend, if you're going to start practicing, to kind of practice that, because that was a real point of anxiety for me, to have to sit for that 4 hours with the mask on. And so just try to practice in that same kind of setting and just get used to it if you're going to be taking it during these times.
Taylor.
All right, yeah, I can go next. So hi everyone, Taylor Pasick, work at GBD. And I actually I've only taken the fundamentals exam so far. I took the fundamentals exam last October. So I guess not the last October, but the year before actually. And I was supposed to take the professional and the practicum in last April, and then that got canceled, of course. And then I rescheduled for October, and I actually got COVID and was not able to take my tests. So I am trying again in April. So I'm also interested in hearing some questions about the specifically the practicum exam.
Last but not least, Chloe.
All right. Hi, guys. I started my exams in October 2019, and I took the PX and the FX together. And then, much like Ella, I was going to take the practicum in the spring of 2020, and that got pushed out. So I sat for that in October and then waited weeks and weeks and weeks as well. So I did take one of my exams during COVID. It was a little claustrophobic feeling with a mask on after a while, and like you kind of get, well, maybe it's just me, you kind of get cotton mouth, and you can't take water in there with you. So just like keep that in mind. And another thing I always like to point out to people is if you have to go to the bathroom during the exam, your clock doesn't stop. So choose wisely if you have to leave the room, because the time can get pretty tight. I think I had a couple minutes left on the practicum by the time I was done. So, yeah.
So I think I'm going to piggyback on Chloe's advice, because I think that that's really good advice. And a reminder, you can't bring anything in with you. So you have no snacks, no water, no gum, you get nothing. So you really have to be mindful. If you do need a restroom break or a break to drink water, you can bring those things, but you have to go out into the lobby and the clock doesn't stop. So I would just say, hold it, wait, because you will need all of that time. And I think one of the best recommendations that I can make for the practicum is to break down that 4 hours based on the number of questions, divide that up and look at the clock and write down. They'll give you a piece of paper and just write down, like, I need to be done with each section by this time or you will not finish, and just burn through everything you know. If you know it, just answer it, move on. If you don't know it, flag it and go back to it. But the tricky part with the practicum is you can't jump between case studies. So as Teresa said, you get a residential, a small commercial, and a large commercial, and you have to finish that case study in its entirety before you can move on to the next case study. And so you really want to be managing your time wisely. I took the practicum twice. The first time I took it, I ran out of time. And when I got my results, I missed the bar to pass by 5 points. So it was 495 was my score. So I had to sit through the whole thing again. And really, I think it's like, what, Teresa, 2 points per question or something like that if you work it out. So it was a handful of questions that I'd missed. And really, I think it's time, like, just watch the clock.
Can you choose which case study you start with, or it just pops up and that's what you do?
Yep. And the case studies are fun. Like, it is intimidating. I think the practicum is really scary. It is intimidating, but it's like work. It's what we do all the time. And once you get in there with the new drag and drop, like, it feels like a regular day of work. And so I think, you know, when you're studying, just try to find the joy. Like, this is what we have chosen to do for a profession, and it's daunting, but it's going to make you a better designer, and just try to enjoy the process.
Yeah, I remember saying to my boss afterwards, like, if it wasn't for being so stressed out and being timed, like, that's actually pretty fun to do, the practicum.
How was the software for you both?
Sorry, I was going to tap into that, and I think you're hitting at the software. That I've known many people that have had the software glitch on them, and so if you run into any problems, I've had people, it shut down, they had to restart. make sure you go tell the person monitoring it, because if you don't tell them and you try to go to CIDQ and say, oh, my thing did this and that, if it's not documented at the test center, they won't accept it. So make sure you get that document if you have any problems. Sorry, Taylor, do you want to go now?
Oh, no, I just, was the software easy to use? Did you find that, you know, overall it was, like you said, I guess, another day of work?
Sorry, Ella, you're muted.
The software is super easy. There's a little tutorial on the NCIDQ website, so I would definitely watch that. And then you can pay for a practice exam, which I did. I don't think it's entirely worth it. I think it'll make you familiar with it, but it's honestly so basic. It's just drag and drop. So I don't know. If you like the practice test, I would go for it, but you only get to use it once. And you don't get to see your results. They give you just a blanket score. They don't show you which questions you got correct or incorrect. So I didn't find it to be a very beneficial study tool.
I was wondering how you guys prepared and like what your study habits were.
Well, I will say that being out of school for a while, you kind of had to relearn like how you study. And so I had this study guide and this fat book, and I didn't even know where to start. I would say for me, the biggest key is just like time management and like blocking out, like, here's my goal. I'm going to get through X amount of chapters by this date, and then I'm going to move on. And I'm going to start 3 months before the test date. So you can kind of start to chip away. And I'm also the kind of person where smaller chunks of studying were more beneficial to me than going and trying to sit for hours. So give yourself a little time, I guess, at the start to kind of feel out how you learn best.
Yeah, I feel like just giving yourself enough time before the exam to study. I know I like planned out exactly what weekends I was going to study what chapters. And then I just wanted to go do something else. And so I felt like I ran out of time before every exam. And then by the end, I was like just trying to cram everything in. So I definitely wouldn't suggest that. But as for me, I just kind of went through one of the reference guides and literally penciled, highlighted, read the whole thing, took notes on it, typed it, printed those notes out, and then just highlighted and drew all over those notes, because I'm such a visual learner that I need it to be colorful. I need to be able to kind of picture the information in my head where I learned it. So that's been really helpful for me.
That big study book is like so helpful. And I did the same thing, Taylor. I just like color coded my highlighting, because it will explicitly tell you after a paragraph, like, you will find this on the practicum exam, or you will find this, or it won't be tested. And so you just don't save that to your memory bank. I think that book is really well organized and has a great intro. Lewis?
Oh, no, I was just curious which book you're referring to, and if there is it like the balanced one, or there's a couple, at least that I've kind of briefly looked into. So which one was helpful for you?
It's the blue one.
That's the ballast one.
Yeah.
That thing is there a lending library with like IIDA or anything like that, or does everyone kind of get their own, or their office has one?
IIDA can't provide it to you because we're not supposed to do that for sharing resources. We'll get in trouble, but we do encourage all of you to share with each other. So if somebody on this call, like Ella, had it and wanted to lend it to anyone, and if anyone wants to form a study group, like if all of you are here to take the exam, get to know each other, maybe post in the chat your contact info so you can share resources.
To piggyback on that, I'd also say that a lot of firms have study resources, and even if they don't, a lot of times if you just ask, they will get them for you and then keep them as a resource for the firm. So it's kind of an investment on their end. So if you're finding that you don't have access to materials, I would go to your employer first and see if they have some or if they would be willing to provide some. And then if the answer for some reason is no, then broaden the reach to friends, colleagues, anyone on this call. Yeah, because they're out there just floating around, waiting to be marked up and highlighted some more.
A couple people have asked about the Q practice workshops and if they're worth it and helpful. I've heard good things about them. I don't know if Ella, Chloe, or Taylor wants to speak to those.
I've heard the same thing. I haven't made the jump and actually purchasing anything. I have had a couple friends who've used it and like have sworn by it.
Yeah, I have heard no negative things about doing it except for the cost. Everybody I've heard said it's well worth it and prepares you the best for the type of questions that are asked. One thing I also wanted to mention was that when you're scheduling your exams, we've heard from people that you don't have to do them all the same day. Like you can space them out by week. So, you know, I did them all in one day and that was terrible, but schedule one and then 2 weeks later maybe schedule another one and then 2 weeks later schedule another one. So then you have the time in between to really brush up on that particular stuff that you're studying. So give yourself time in that whole month window to really focus on the individual tests and then come back and maybe take a breather and then start studying more so, you know, in depth for the next one, and don't do them all at once.
I can't even imagine.
I can't believe you did that, Teresa. No, I would lose my mind.
Well, when I took the test back in 2008, I had to do a pen and paper, and it was a full day and then a half day, and it was awful. And so now that they give you the whole month to do it, that's great. Take your time.
I will say also the Ballast Interior Design Reference Manual is honestly the only book I used, because for me, just trying to look at other reference material and stuff just kind of made me overwhelmed. So I just stuck with the one.
Same. That was the only book that I used. And then I bought the Ballast flashcards and I kept the flashcards in my purse. And then I used the Quizlet app. I don't know if anybody had that, but you can actually use other people's NCIDQ flashcards as well as your own. And there's a variety of games and stuff, and it'll read it to you. So I would just be commuting in the car, like listening to flashcards. And then the codes that they give you, that they narrow down, like what, you know, codes you really need to know. I printed those. And again, I would just like keep them with me all the time, like pinned up at my desk. I'd read them in the, you know, whenever I was commuting. Just try to save as much as you can to your memory. And they do have codes that you can reference during the exam, but it just slows you down and you'll burn through time. So if you can start memorizing, again, just restroom mounting accessory heights and things, and just save those to your memory bank, it'll serve you very well.
And I will say for the codes, as familiar as you feel like you might be with codes in general, they do provide their own codes. So there's a few little quirks that are kind of different from what you may know in your everyday job. So it's definitely good to reference those, even if you think you're this code expert.
Put a link to their codes list in the chat for your reference. And there's also, they ask questions in a weird way. So it's about knowing the knowledge, but it's also about knowing how to answer the question. It's something to be mindful of.
Yeah, that's a good point. I feel like some people think, well, I'm good at multiple choice, so maybe I don't need to study for as long. But I would say they're not exams you can cram for. They are asked in unique ways the questions are.
And you need to be able to, like, you have to read everything. Like, they will throw in which of these is not the right thing to do. And so the exam will let you highlight or cross things out. So immediately read the question exactly as it's written, highlight, and then be sure to cross out any wrong answer that jumps out to you, just to narrow the possible responses, because in some of those questions, everything's a possible correct answer, but you need to think, like, as the interior designer, what is my responsibility and what can I impact? Because there's multiple correct answers.
Okay, a couple more questions and that were in the chat. Somebody wanted to know for the practicum specifically, what does it focus on? Space planning, code compliance, etc. Maybe Teresa, you could answer that one.
Yeah, so it's not really about space planning. It's about the codes, the construction documents, and I believe detailing. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, because I haven't done it in a long, long time. But it's really about the technical ability to it. So I think they've pretty much taken the space planning aspect off the table, and it's more about the construction documents and the nitty-gritty details of it. I don't know if Ella or Chloe, you want to tap into that?
Yeah, there wasn't a lot on space planning, as I recall. There was maybe when I did the practice test, or maybe it was on Q practice, there were some where you would drag and drop some furniture, but it's not really emphasized much.
No, I think the only space planning that I remember from the exam was in relationship to actual, like, circulation. So, like, which way would you rotate this bed in a residential to make sure you could get in and out of the room? So it's not very complex, but there are very few questions, mostly egress. And I think there's a lot of RCP and lighting. Like, I remember a lot of fire sprinklers and alarms. And again, the difference between exit, egress, corridor, access.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's a lot of, like, details and sections that you either label or here's the plan and here's the section cut, which detail is reflecting the correct scenario.
Okay. Another question about how much time you spent studying. So how many months, weeks, and then how many hours per week did you study for?
I was averaging this last round like 2 hours a night every night. I would get up before work and try to study, try to get an hour in the morning and an hour at night, and then do like a 4-hour block on the weekends. But that's a little extreme. And I think one of the disadvantages to taking, for me, is my personal life is crazy. I have 2 small kids and I work insane hours. But also I've been doing this for a long time, and just making sure that I was answering the questions based on the book, not my life experience. I think that the experience was actually a disadvantage.
Yeah, I would say, oh, go ahead.
No, you got it.
I would say, I honestly don't remember how far ahead of time I started when I first decided to take this on. But I took the time to read through every chapter from the study guide, because I needed to go through all of that fully once. And then it's when I went back and started chipping away at the key information and making a separate document or note cards, to where I got to a point where I didn't really look at the book anymore unless I was referencing graphics. So then once I got through the book once, I would say that I was studying for like at least an hour a night. I'd try and go just sit by myself and do that. And then back before COVID, I was going to a coffee shop like every Saturday for a couple hours. And if I was just consistent each day with getting at least a small chunk, and just having that repetition, that was super helpful. And I will say that people told me to take these exams before I had kids, and I'm not giving you that life advice, but I am kind of giving you that life advice because it's really hard.
I took the exams a long time ago, but that was going to be my one big advice. As soon as you can take them. So that 2 years, just do it.
One quick question is, based on all the like study materials that you all use, was there any like anything specific or sort of like any categories that you felt surprised by? Like when you showed up, like you didn't see that stuff covered, or was it all kind of there for the most part?
I think it's all in there. I wasn't surprised by anything.
Did I still ask the drapery questions?
Yes, the calculations.
I would
Skip it. Skip it. Don't waste your time. Come back if you have time, but I didn't, so I skipped it and was just fine.
That was going to be my game plan as well.
That reminds me too, on the practicum, you'll get questions and there's like 10 things you have to drag and drop in, or you'll have the adjacency bubbles and you have to drag in things. And if you miss one out of those 10 possibilities, you get the whole question wrong. So if it's something where you're pretty positive you're not going to get all of them right, just in the essence of time, you might flag it. And if you think you can get back to it, do it. But yeah.
Yeah, don't calculate any lighting. It's not worth it because you're flipping back through the lighting schedule. It's just not worth it. Skip it. Skip it.
Chloe or Ella, could you speak about kind of how the test centers were set up with COVID going on? Like, did they have fewer desks in there, or were the proctors still like walking around? And how was the experience taking the exam during a pandemic?
Where did you test, Ella?
The one over on the east side.
Off McLaughlin by On Point and stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just this small room and you go in and there's a line of workstations, like study carrels on both walls, and what, they're maybe like 4 feet wide. And I figured for COVID, they would maybe just be filling every other desk, but that wasn't the case. They were all filled like normal. But the people weren't walking around the room anymore. You had to raise your hand and flag them down through the window if you needed them. My daughter's freaking out, so I'm gonna mute.
Yeah, I think the rest of it, it felt the same. The check-in, they are still scheduling a lot of exams. I think the only difference was the mask situation.
Full chat questions. Is there a time frame that all 3 exams have to be taken within?
Yeah, so that one, yeah, it's so for the IDFX, you have about 2 years. The IDPX and the practicum are a 10 exam administration, for about 5 years.
I've never worked on residential projects. What would you say I need to familiarize myself with to prepare for exam? Nothing.
I remember for that case study, I feel like I was expecting it to be like a home residential, but it was actually like a section of a condo in a commercial building. So that kind of threw me for a loop. So I don't know how often they change what those problems are for each case study, but I'd just say I'd be doubtful that they're going to do a residential home. It's probably going to be a section, like a unit within a commercial, like multifamily type unit. Yeah.
Just in general, they're not testing your design ability or knowledge to design a specific type of space. They're testing if you can read a code that they give you and apply it to a space. It's less about what it is.
Right.
Are there testing centers available all over Oregon or just in Portland? I don't know. Does anyone know?
Yeah, they're everywhere. So the parametric testing, they don't just do this exam. They do lots of exams. So I know like architecture used to go there for their ARE, and you could be doing your test right next to someone that's doing an accounting testing. So it's just a center for tests. And so that's something to be aware of too, that you're going to have a lot of different people around there, and it's not just everyone taking the exact same test as you, but they're located pretty much in all major cities of Oregon.
And you can take earplugs in with you.
One other tip that I heard was that you want to be comfortable, but don't wear any piece of clothing that is loud. So you don't want to wear a jacket that swishes when you move, because they will ask you to take it off. But it tends to run maybe chillier in those spaces. So really think about what you wear and being comfortable and not making noise to disrupt other people. So
another testing center tip, you are not allowed to bring anything in with you. Sorry, my dog's about to bark. But on your way in, you're allowed to ask for a calculator, and they will only give it to you if you ask for it, because they don't offer it. They offer you your paper and your pencil, and then you say, I think I'm supposed to get a calculator. And they're like, oh yeah, you are. Mm-hmm. And then they give it to you and let you go in. So if you don't get your calculator, be sure to ask for it. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck using the computer calculator, which is a lot slower. So
yeah, that's huge.
Okay, 6 o'clock. Any other last minute tips and tricks from our panelists? I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat. Okay.
Last advice would be just start studying. That's the hardest part, is getting started. And once you start, don't stop until it's done. Takes a lot of time and commitment, but the satisfaction when it's done, I'm sure all the panelists can attest that it feels so good.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Eve, do you want to close us out?
And thank you everyone for joining, asking some awesome questions, and our 4 amazing panelists. Thank you so much for your knowledge and wisdom, and definitely learned a lot. I learned a lot that I had zero idea about before. So thank you. If there's any other lingering questions that people thought of just now, ask away. Otherwise, we'll let you all go to enjoy your evening.
Teresa, would you be willing to post your contact info in the chat in case anyone had NCIDQ specific questions?
And I'm also, if you need more information and you forget my email, if you look on CIDQ's website, there is an ambassador location map, and my contact information is also on there.
Okay.
Good luck
Thanks,
to all the
everyone.
teachers.
Good luck.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.